2014. I'm sitting in my living room watching Man of Steel on cable. The movie ends, and I'm left with this sinking feeling. This wasn't the Superman I knew. This wasn't the Superman I grew up with. The one who stood for hope, kindness, and unwavering determination. This Superman felt off. For years after that, I dismissed Superman as lame, misunderstood, and irrelevant in a world that seemed to crave darker, grittier heroes. But as time went on, I began to question my own judgment. Was Superman really lame, or had we as an audience lost sight of what made him so special in the first place? To answer that, we need to go back, way back, to the origins of Superman, the cultural shifts that shaped him, and the modern interpretations that have both elevated and diminished his legacy. This isn't just a story about a superhero, it's a story about how we, as a society, view heroism itself. Let's start at the beginning. Superman first appeared in Action Comics #1 in 1938, created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. He wasn't just another character, he was a phenomenon. Born during the Great Depression and on the brink of World War II, Superman was a symbol of hope in a world that desperately needed it. He wasn't just strong, he was a champion for the oppressed, a character who fought for the little guy. In those early stories, Superman wasn't just battling mad scientists or alien invaders. He was taking on corrupt politicians, slumlords, and even domestic abusers. He was a social justice warrior in the truest sense of the term, and he was revolutionary. Superman wasn't just a hero, he was the hero, the blueprint for every superhero that came after him. But as the years went by, the world changed, and so did Superman. And that's where things started to get complicated. In 1954, the Comics Code Authority was established, and it changed everything. This was in response to public outcry over the alleged corrupting influence of comic books, fueled by Dr. Frederick Wertham's book, Seduction of the Innocent. Wertham argued that comics were turning kids into delinquents, and the CCA was created to sanitize the medium. The rules were strict. No sex, no drugs, no cursing, no questioning authority. Cops had to always be right, and villains had to always lose. For Superman, this meant a shift toward more simplistic, morally unambiguous stories. The complexity and social commentary of his early adventures were replaced by campy, lighthearted tales. Superman became less of a crusader for justice and more of a Boy Scout, a caricature of his former self. And while this era gave us some iconic moments, like the introduction of Kryptonite or the first team-ups with Batman and Robin, it also began to strip Superman of his edge. To some, this made him seem boring, even lame. But the truth is, Superman wasn't the problem. It was the way he was being written. Fast forward to the 1980s, and comic books were undergoing a seismic shift. Works like Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns redefined what superhero stories could be. These stories were dark, gritty, and deeply philosophical, exploring the moral ambiguities of power and heroism. They were a reflection of a changing world, one that was increasingly skeptical of authority and traditional ideals. Superman, however, struggled to fit into this new landscape. In The Dark Knight Returns, he's portrayed as a government stooge, a far cry from the independent, morally steadfast hero of old. And while these stories were groundbreaking, they also contributed to a growing perception that Superman was outdated, a relic of a simpler time. But here's the thing, Superman wasn't outdated. He was just being misunderstood. The problem wasn't Superman. It was the way writers were trying to fit him into a world that didn't seem to have a place for him. Then came 1992, and DC Comics made headlines by killing off Superman in The Death of Superman. The story was a massive success, proving that Superman could still captivate audiences when the stakes were high. But it also highlighted a growing problem. Superman's invincibility made it hard to create compelling drama. If he's so powerful, how do you challenge him? How do you make him relatable? The answer for a time was to make him more human. Stories like Superman, Red Sun, and Kingdom Come explored Superman's vulnerabilities and moral dilemmas, showing that he could be complex and compelling. But these were exceptions, not the rule. For the most part, Superman remained stuck in a cycle of stagnation, struggling to find his place in a world that seemed to have moved on. And then came the 2000s, which were a mixed bag for Superman. On one hand, we got Superman Returns, a film that tried to recapture the magic of the Christopher Reeve era but ultimately fell flat. On the other hand, we got Man of Steel, a film that reimagined Superman for a modern audience but sparked intense debate among fans. Man of Steel is a fascinating case study. On a technical level, it's a well-made film with stunning visuals and a strong performance by Henry Cavill. But it's also a film that fundamentally misunderstands its protagonist. The scene where Clark lets his father die to protect his secret is a perfect example. It's a moment that betrays everything Superman stands for: his compassion, his selflessness, his unwavering commitment to doing the right thing. The film's climax, where Superman kills Zod, is equally problematic. While it's meant to be a moment of moral complexity, it feels out of character for Superman, who has always found another way. These choices, while bold, left many fans feeling alienated. Was this really Superman, or was he just another brooding, conflicted hero in a world full of them? And then, in 2013, the same year Man of Steel was released, Injustice: Gods Among Us debuted. This alternate universe story portrays Superman as a tyrant, a hero turned villain who rules the world with an iron fist. While Injustice is a compelling story in its own right, it also reinforced the idea that Superman is only interesting when he's dark and flawed. This trend continued in films like Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, where Superman is portrayed as distant and detached, a far cry from the hopeful, inspiring figure of old. By the time Justice League rolled around, Superman had become a shadow of his former self, a character defined more by his power than his humanity. But here's the thing: Superman isn't supposed to be dark and flawed. He's supposed to be a beacon of hope, a symbol of what we can achieve when we strive to be better. And thankfully, not all hope was lost. In recent years, we've seen a resurgence of the classic Superman, the one who stands for hope, kindness, and unwavering determination. Shows like Superman and Lois and My Adventures with Superman have reminded us why we fell in love with the character in the first place. These stories embrace Superman's optimism and idealism, proving that he doesn't need to be dark or edgy to be compelling. And then, there's James Gunn's upcoming Superman film. From what we've seen so far, it looks like a return to form. A bright, colorful, and hopeful take on the character that celebrates everything he stands for. It's a reminder that Superman isn't lame, he's timeless. So, is Superman lame? The answer is no, but it's complicated. Superman's perceived lameness is less about the character himself and more about how he's been portrayed over the years. When writers lose sight of what makes Superman special, his hope, his kindness, his unwavering commitment to doing the right thing, he can come across as boring or irrelevant. But when those qualities are embraced, he's anything but lame. Superman is a character who represents the best of us. He's a reminder that even in the darkest times, there's always hope. He's a symbol of what we can achieve when we strive to be better, to do better. And in a world that often feels cynical and divided, that's something we need more than ever. As we look to the future, it's clear that Superman's legacy is in good hands. With new stories, new interpretations, and a renewed focus on what makes him special, there's never been a better time to be a fan of the Man of Steel. Whether you're a lifelong devotee or a newcomer to the world of comics, one thing is certain: Superman will always be there, fighting for truth, justice, and a better tomorrow.